Rise tweeted today saying directional arrow is a necessity. And whilst I use arrow right, I looked in the comments and he said that we needed to use both. So that's exactly what I did, and I'm going to show you how I hit this shot in just 30 minutes of practice after never using arrow left before. So the first thing that we had to do is obviously bind arrow left to somewhere on our controller, and I do actually have a free spot on circle, or as you'll see on the controller overlay, for some reason it says B. So you can see my normal arrow is on L1, my boost is on R1, and then I have arrow right on square and arrow left on circle. So there are my binds, and the first thing that I was doing was just seeing the differences with arrow left compared to arrow right, and basically did this by just jumping around, seeing the differences. I know there's two different kind of main directions that you're going to be going with arrow left and arrow right, so it's just opposite. It's just the opposite, and that's where the biggest problem for me is that breaking of the muscle memory. After using arrow right for probably a good year or so, having my left analog stick point the opposite direction was very difficult to get my head around. But after that, just getting used to kind of jumping, try and stay close to the ball. This is one of the things I do to kind of stay upright as much as possible is I spin around my stick in circles. So you'll see me do that quite a lot. The next step of what I did after I was kind of staying close to the ball was I was trying to throw myself off completely to find those like blank spots. And what I mean by blank spots is there'll be times where you just can't control or figure out which direction to point your car in, especially when you're learning this to start with. So you'll see a few times I'll just drop to the floor because I've kind of arrowed the wrong way. But after probably about 5 minutes of practice, I managed to kind of get my head around it a little bit, and that's where I started to avoid hitting the ground so much. After this, we went on, and for some reason I started playing a little bit with arrow right. I did that, all right. But then you can obviously see this is me using the arrow left. So it was a bit of a learning curve, but surprisingly, considering this is maybe just 5-ish minutes after we started, it doesn't actually look horrific. So moving on, one of the big things, as I mentioned, is that muscle memory. So I had to keep kind of correcting myself by ensuring that I was jumping and pointing my analog stick to the right rather than the left, as I do with my other arrow. So that was one of the main problems that I was facing. But once I started getting into the habit of doing that the right way, it made it a lot easier. And to kind of bank on that as well, one of the ways that is a good way to learn that is the rings map. So one of the first things I did was hop into the rings map, and I absolutely smashed the first 2 levels in a row, and it very much caught me off guard. I was like, oh, okay, I've done it. This is easy. I was very wrong. I hadn't done it. I understand how the arrow works, which I think is the biggest learning curve for someone who doesn't use directional arrow, simply because I haven't used I have used arrow right before for quite a while. But the problem that a lot of people will be facing is the fact that they've never used this before, and it took me so long to use and learn arrow right. I'm still learning how to use it today, like a year and a half, 2 years on. But I saw a lot of comments below Rise's tweet basically saying, I've got one arrow right, I've got one directional arrow, there's no need for me to learn both. So I wanted to put it to the test. I wanted to see how long it would take for me to learn this. And whilst I wouldn't say I've learned it, I would say I'm a lot more comfortable, and I will be looking to learn it completely so I can use both in match. Getting on to level number 4 or 5 here, I started to struggle on turning to the right. I think that was the main thing I was struggling with. I kept pointing it to the wrong way. So what I did is I practiced a little bit doing that kind of like circular motion on my controller on my analog stick with arrow with arrow right, the blue button on the controller overlay, and then I switched it up and just started rotating clockwise rather than anti-clockwise, and that made it a little bit easier. But then, of course, I messed up and I accidentally reset, so I had to start again, which was brilliant, and I did this cool little loop that I'd never be able to do again, even if I tried. Moving on though, this is level number 5, and this one did actually give me quite a bit of difficulty until it kind of just clicked. My biggest problem was in these rings maps was I kept turning to the left and I couldn't turn to the right. And that's just because, again, my muscle memory from arrow right is the opposite. So I kept turning basically the opposite way. And with directional arrow left, it kept making me want to turn left, essentially. But moving on, I did actually like do these ring maps and levels a little bit better than I expected. And this, I would say, we're probably maybe 15-20 minutes in. And I've started with never using arrow left before previously, so this is literally the first time that I've tried learning it properly. Obviously I had arrow right, so it makes it a lot easier, but I think this is the type of thing you want to do. You want to throw yourself in the deep end. You want to just restrict yourself from using everything else. I think if you try and go into a match and use this occasionally, you're not going to learn quite as much. The best way to learn it is literally just allow yourself only to use arrow left or right or whatever. Or, you know, I'd start with one and then move on to the other one later on. But as you see, I was quite happy with how far we got in such a short amount of time. So I wanted to kind of move on and put it into some shots. So first shot, immediately after loading up the trainer pack, I nearly score a flip reset. And this is kind of the theme for the rest of it as well. Literally, I was feeling pretty comfortable. There was a lot of like dead zones and like blank zones, I call them, as well, where I literally like was getting a little bit lost. But it's taken 25-ish minutes to be able to hit a flip reset, which wasn't too bad. Considering when you saw at the start, I barely knew how to fly in a circle. You can learn and adjust and whatnot, and you can see this doesn't look actually that far off my arrow right. I mean, it is way off my arrow right. That one was a little bit of a combination between arrow left and right. But you can start to see it's going to take time, right? But it's not as bad as people make it out to be. I moved on a couple of shots. I had to just double check which way I had to rotate again. And after doing that, I nearly scored that one. And then I pulled this one out the bag, which was, again, I would be happy if I scored that with arrow right. And then immediately after that, we move on to another one. Not the bestest shot ever, this one. But again, you can see like the consistency started to creep in. I feel a lot more comfortable. Move on to air dribbles. This is the biggest one. Again, there we go. A bit of muscle memory kicking in from arrow right. I went the wrong way and just went away from the ball. Not the best air dribbles at all, but you can see the control and everything is just so much better than what it was from the start. And this is essentially how I learn. This is my thought process. This is how I learn, and this is how I go through. And this is probably one of the main reasons why I wanted to bind arrow left, because this type of shot is one of my most difficult. I find this pop up. I can do it from the left wall. I can't do it from the right wall. And I've kind of ran this one through in full. So we're coming up to probably about half an hour. I think in total, I may have played for about 34 minutes. And that's after, again, never using arrow right or left. Sorry, never using arrow left before. So all my muscle memory completely just being written now. I've just kind of done an intensive course in the span of half an hour, and breaking it down into different kind of levels and ways to make it easier for me to understand. And that's exactly what you should approach it as too. You shouldn't go ahead and try and, try flick resets or all the fancy things until you've understood how it works. And building that understanding takes a lot of time, but as long as you do it in the right way, you can do it you can do that a lot better. So I think kind of this process works for me. A different process might work for you, and again, it might take a lot more time, but that is essentially how I learn aero left, a directional aero that I've never used before, in just about half an hour. Thanks for watching. If you found that helpful or informative at all, please drop me a follow. That'd be great. I also do coaching as well, so again, if that's something you're interested, by all means approach me. Thank you very much.